Oil at $200 per barrel, another strait in the Middle East blocked, and a complete energy collapse around the world. This is exactly what Iran is threatening after Donald Trump announced that starting next week, the US will begin direct attacks on power plants and bridges throughout Iran. Now Iran is threatening to block not only the Hormuz Strait, but all sea routes through which oil leaves the Persian Gulf. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that, quote, energy supplies will either be available to everyone or to no one. Iran is basically saying, if you are strangling us with a blockade, we will strangle everyone, meaning the entire global oil market. And Trump, in response, pulls out his biggest trump card. He threatens to start striking Iran's energy sector, power plants, and Iran itself. In this episode, why the threat to block all the straits in the region is not a bluff, but a very real scenario with oil prices at $200 per barrel. What kind of strikes on the energy sector is Trump preparing, and why has he saved them for last? And most importantly, what is already happening with prices and shipping right now while we are discussing this topic? So let's go through everything step by step. What actually happened? Iran has officially closed the Hormuz Strait, the very one through which a fifth of all the world's oil passed before the war. And they stated that the strait will remain closed, quoting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps until the end of American misdeeds. In response, the United States of America has once again imposed a naval blockade on Iranian ports. I talked about this in detail in previous episodes. And now, Iran is responding to this blockade not with words, but with a threat that has shocked the entire global market. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran has explicitly promised to close all other export corridors that benefit the United States and its allies in the region. It's important to understand what's behind these words. And behind these words is a very specific second strait, the closure of which could actually paralyze the entire global oil market. We're talking about the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. It's a narrow passage between the Arabian Peninsula and Africa. Then comes the entrance to the Red Sea, and further on, as you know, the Suez Canal. And here's the whole trick of the Iranian design. Iran itself can't reach as far as the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. It's too far away, and of course it can't block it directly. But its allies can easily reach there. These are the Yemeni Houthis, who are sitting right on the shore of this strait, just like the Iranians are sitting on the shore of the Strait of Hormuz. And the Houthis have already made their voices heard. A high-ranking representative of the movement explicitly warned on Monday. The group is ready to close the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait if Saudi Arabia continues to bomb Yemen. And this Yemeni official stated that such a move could push the price of oil to $200 per barrel. $200? For reference, a barrel currently costs about $85. For the Brent crude, and anything above $100 is just pain at every gas station around the world, including, of course, American ones. So basically, the Houthis have their hand on the global gasoline price switch, and Iran is really ready to play its last card in this war. That's exactly what they're publicly threatening today, and here's the very mechanism that makes the whole situation truly hellish. Look at how beautifully and treacherously everything is tied into one knot. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz and half of the oil from the Persian Gulf comes to a halt. Saudi Arabia, trying to save itself from this situation after the US starts a war against Iran on February 28, begins to send its oil by rerouting it through a 1,200-kilometer pipeline all the way to the Red Sea. But to get from the Red Sea to the open ocean, you have to pass through the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. And the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait is controlled by the Houthis, and the Houthis are an Iranian proxy. So basically, Iran can block both exits at the same time. Both the main Hormuz and the backup Bab-el-Mandeb, which the Saudis are currently using to escape. This will be a huge problem. And this is no longer just a theory. One of the key recent reports today goes like this. The Emirati port of Fujairah. This is the largest facility. The bypass route around the Hormuz Strait has essentially ceased to operate. According to analysts, this removes about another 6 million barrels per day from the market. And just think about it. Even under the cover of 2 American aircraft carriers and powerful US aviation, they couldn't keep this port open. Tanker captains simply refuse to go there because, as they say, everyone wants to live. And against this backdrop, a member of the political bureau of the Houthi movement called Ansar Allah, Muhammad al-Farah, even made a statement, quote, "If the current situation escalates, the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait and the Hormuz Strait will be closed as part of an operational alliance with Iran. That is, Iran and the Houthis are ready to work together and block both of the world's main trade arteries at once. And if the southern entrance to the Red Sea falls as well, then the Suez Canal will also be at risk. That's another strait. This is no longer just an oil crisis. This is paralysis of a good half of the world's sea routes, both for oil and for food, which is critical." Let's look at the numbers. 20% of all the world's oil passes through the Hormuz Strait. Another 12% of oil passes through the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. Another 5% of all the world's oil passes through the Suez Canal. As a result, almost half of all global oil supplies could come to a halt. Now, let's talk about how Donald Trump responded to this. And Trump responds with escalation, pulling out his biggest trump card. In addition to the latest strikes, the US military has been hitting Iran for the fourth night in a row. And by the way, the last wave lasted 7 hours and targeted dozens of military sites around Hormuz. Trump is now threatening to move to a completely new level. He threatened that next week the US would start striking Iranian energy facilities and bridges if Tehran does not come to the negotiating table. Basically, Trump is threatening to cut off Iran's electricity and tear the country apart by depriving it of its transportation arteries and logistics. As a result, the US is now threatening to cut off Iran's electricity, and both sides are calling this coercion into a deal. Both. Notice that, both Iran and the US. But the hostage in this whole game turns out to be the rest of the world, which these two are about to subject to an oil shock. And in this context, I want to share with you a wonderful quote from the journalist Philip Gordon. Listen carefully to every word, because I think he described better than anyone the situation Donald Trump has gotten himself into, and unfortunately, not just himself. Here is a quote from Philip Gordon. "It would only be half as bad if the current standoff reflected each side's confidence that the other side would definitely back down. Iran probably really believes this, given Trump's track record and the level of damage Iran can inflict on the US economy, especially ahead of the midterm congressional elections. However, despite all the bluster, Trump most likely does not believe that Iran will back down anytime soon. This could lead him down a much more dangerous path of military escalation and, of course, a counter-escalation from Iran. The lesson of the failed memorandum is that Iran is not ready to give up control over the Strait of Hormuz. Besides revenue, Iran demands control and recognition of its authority, which it could use as leverage at any moment. On other issues including Lebanon, the nuclear issue, detentions, and negotiations with all these residents. This is exactly what Trump rightly objects to. But it seems he can't do anything about it. But in the meantime, right at this very moment, the sides are bombing each other. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps reported that in response to new American strikes, they attacked targets of the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. Plus, according to the Iranians, they set fire to and destroyed a logistics facility at the Mina Abdullah port in Kuwait. They also struck what they called an American base in Azraq, which is in Jordan. There, they targeted aircraft hangars. And here's another important detail that shows how this vortex of war is expanding. Today, Iran explicitly stated that some of the American strikes against it were launched straight from a base on Jordanian territory. This is important, meaning Iran is actually accusing Jordan of complicity as well and is striking it. And on Wednesday morning, Jordan's air defense intercepted and shot down 3 ballistic missiles that entered its airspace from Iran. So the war is now drawing in not only Iran and the US, but also Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar. There have been strikes on Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and even Oman. And today, Iran is openly calling Jordan an accomplice in the war as well. In other words, the flames are spreading. And here is the most important indicator for me of what is happening and where all this is going. It's the market's reaction. Because, excuse me, but money doesn't lie. Money never lies. Brent crude oil has surged up by 11% in the last 2 days. And if you count from Sunday, it's more than 15%. On Tuesday, a barrel of Brent even jumped up to $87 at one point. Since the beginning of the year, oil has already increased in price by about 40%. And why? I want to emphasize, Bab-el-Mandeb hasn't even been blocked yet. It's open. And it's precisely because of this that Saudi Arabia can export almost 4.5 million barrels of oil per day. And here's a telling moment that perfectly characterizes Donald Trump's wavering in this situation. On Monday, he announced his famous 20% fee for passing through the Strait of Hormuz. I made a separate episode about this. If you missed it, be sure to watch it. We broke everything down there in detail. So, under a barrage of criticism, Trump abandoned this idea on Tuesday. Well, as they say, he just backed down, and he stated without providing any evidence or details that supposedly instead of this 20 transit fee, he would seek some kind of investment agreements with the Gulf countries. Let me point out right away, do you remember in 2025 Trump did a tour of the Middle East? Do you know what he was saying back then? That he achieved it. He had already secured some huge investment deals worth trillions of dollars. Not billions, trillions. And then suddenly a year goes by and he says, listen, I won't impose a 20 transit fee. They will work on getting investment agreements. Damn, but you already achieved them. You supposedly secured them a year ago, worth whole trillions. Where do these monarchies get so much money from? Well, there was already an agreement, and it amazes me that people fall for this. They're like, oh, well, yeah. See how Trump outplayed everyone. He threatened to impose a 20 transit fee, and then the Saudis, for example, and the Emirates said, no, listen, we'd rather invest. This already happened. As Kuchma said, this has already happened. So the person literally reversed course completely in just one day without any arguments. Today he's threatening to seize the strait and charge 20 for passage. Tomorrow he changed his mind. And this indecisiveness is probably the main problem. Because the whole market doesn't understand what this person will do in an hour, and this unpredictability makes everyone panic even more. Meanwhile, shipping in the Hormuz Strait has just come to a halt. According to Kepler, a company that tracks all maritime traffic, only 2 tankers passed through the Hormuz Strait in the past 24 hours. And one of the Turkish tankers actually sank after hitting a mine. So, the strait that Trump confidently calls completely open is actually dead. People are simply afraid to pass through it. Now let's sum it up, and honestly it's not a cheerful one. The world has come to a very dangerous brink. Iran, which has been cornered by the American blockade, has decided to go all in. It is ready to block not just one, but both key straits, the Hormuz and Bab-el-Mandeb, and crash the global oil market for everyone. The logic is simple and desperate. The Iranians are basically saying, listen, if we're going down, then let's all go down together, the whole planet. And Trump, in response, threatens to cut off Iran's electricity and bomb its bridges. And here's what's most alarming about this whole story. There's no adult in the room here, as they say. There's no one to say, stop, let's put an end to this. Well, something's going wrong here. Iran, with nothing left to lose, is dragging the Houthis and the entire region with it. And there's Donald Trump, who in a single day manages to seize straits, hold 20 meetings, then change his mind, then threaten power plants, then announce that he's gathering investments, and so on. And with him, it's impossible to tell where he's bluffing and where he really means it. And between these two, Iran and Trump, there are tankers that are simply afraid to go out to sea. And between them are the oil prices which we suffer from. And between them is the prospect of a global shock affecting not just gasoline but food as well. The thing is, grain also passes through these straits, for example. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone, subtitles.